I literally stumbled on Bitcoin, and there was a website called Stumble Upon, and basically it was a service where you could go to a random site just by clicking a button, and I was very in love with the idea of like exposing myself to different ideas and different viewpoints, and almost like that was my obsession. That was like my big, character-defining hobby. And so I literally spent like half of my day just stumbling on websites. And it was really fascinating because like the internet, especially at that time, was kind of full of crazy ideas and crazy people and like, things that weren't really accepted widely, And Bitcoin was just one of those. And it stuck out because on the one hand, it was doing things that I thought were like technically impossible. And looking back now, I don't think that anymore. It's actually kind of interesting. Like now I know too much about distributed systems to find it, that exciting. But back then I was like just naive enough to get interested, and I got really interested once people started ascribing value to these digital tokens. And it's kind of interesting for us to now think back because nowadays, it seems so obvious that Bitcoin has a price, and you know what the Bitcoin price is. But when I first got into it, there wasn't like a published rate that you could just look at and, oh, this is how much a Bitcoin is worth. It was just like you had these tokens and you could send them back and forth. But what are they worth? You don't know. So first of all, Satoshi would send you some just so you could play around with it. So you could like, you go on IRC, you're like, hey, can I have some Bitcoin? And people would just send you 50 Bitcoin, And then you would obviously want to pay it forward because like, you got introduced because someone was generous enough to give you some, and so you might send some to someone else. At that time, you could also pretty easily mine them. So you could like run the client for a little while, and it would eventually mine some Bitcoin. So it was very accessible to get into, but at the same time, there wasn't like a price that you could just look up and buy Bitcoin or something like that. So I was using a pseudonym like very early on. But I think towards the end of 2010 or so, I stopped. I've always gone by the online handle Just Moon. It's actually funny because people say like, oh, it's obviously like, you just want crypto to moon or whatever. But I've actually chosen that handle like when I was 12, long before crypto was a thing. And so it was a reference to, I like the show Stargate, and that name wasn't available, so I chose Moongate, and then I shortened it to Moon. And then I was constantly confused with a famous Counter-Strike player named Moon. And so I had to explain that I'm Just Moon, the guy who runs this website, not the famous Counter-Strike player, and so Just Moon stuck. And so that name has like changed its meaning over time, like several times. Like at one point, people thought I was into Sailor Moon, the anime. At one point, people thought that I was secretly a Muslim because I had the moon logo everywhere. And then yet another time, now people think that it's some kind of crypto reference, and none of those are true. I think like the big change, what changed our mind about that was when Gavin got invited to, I think it was like a CIA conference or something like that. And that was like, that's, he didn't get like, he wouldn't go there and get arrested or anything like that, So it was like, okay, maybe this is more okay than we thought,
Gotcha.
And it was just like, the expectation was that it was like a rebellion, right? It was like, this is going to be looked at like, the French Revolution, like this kind of level of rebellion, because you're going after one of the big sovereignties of the state, but the state just didn't look at it that way at all. They were like, oh, this is some crazy new technology, this is interesting, there's like, we want to protect consumers, but at the same time, we don't want to crush this important new technology. And actually, like, maybe the state almost like surprised us with how they looked at it, and kind of like suddenly we looked like we were the regressive people, because like, we were expecting this big adversarial thing, and it was actually, a lot more, no, this is interesting, like tell us how this works.